Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Um, I think some of you I think I know, and some of you I think I don't see as patients, but this is kind of a new thing that we're doing. I am one of the doctors with Form. I have some other training in a field called culinary medicine, which is basically a field to kind of get people back into the kitchen. It's also to help educate doctors. So we have more nutrition education. And it's really trying to use evidence-based medicine to help improve people's diets and nutrition. So I was very excited when I was asked to do a class like this. So what we're going to be focusing on today are spices and herbs. And one of the reason why I wanted to do this is I think I think the biggest reason that people struggle, multiple reasons why people struggle when they are trying to lose weight, is because they are eating quote unquote diet food. And I think diet food can get very, very boring and repetitive. And so I have had several patients say to me, I'm not comfortable, getting outside of what I normally do. I don't really know how to cook with spices and herbs. I want to try some different things. So the reason why I think this class can be very helpful for people is typically when we're trying to make a dish healthier, we're trying to remove the things that make it highly palatable and tasty, but also give it a lot of calories. And typically those things are sugar and fat. So if you remove those things, we need to find other elements that are going to still make the dish healthy but tasty, so that you're not going to feel like you're eating diet food, you're just eating really delicious food. So I think we will go ahead and get started with the actual discussion about the spices and the recipe. So just want to do a little disclaimer. We are recording this class so that other Form participants can see the class on YouTube, but they won't. But the only thing that's being recorded is me. None of the guests into this Zoom meeting will be recorded. Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to add is I'm pretty laid back. I like to keep this very casual. I love questions. So what I would like you to do is to put questions in the chat. Oops, lost my earbud. It's back in now. Type the questions into the chat, and I'll probably answer the majority of them at the end. But if there's something really pressing about something that I'm doing, we can certainly, you can interject, and I'm happy to start answering the questions. Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're making a vegetarian salad where we are going to be highlighting some particular herbs and spices, and also a little bit of citrus to give it a little bit more punch and just kind of a little bit more interest in the recipe. So let's talk a little bit about cumin and coriander. Basically, besides just tasting delicious, cumin and coriander actually have very specific health properties. And essentially, the things that make them healthy are some things called phytonutrients. And phytonutrients essentially are plant compounds that give health and promote healing. They also have a lot of antioxidants, and those are agents that can help protect you from cellular damage and the buildup of free radicals. And free radicals essentially are what damage cells and can kind of promote aging, illness, and even certain cancers. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Diets, countries that have diets that are a little bit more diverse with their spice profile tend to have lower rates of particular disease processes. For instance, the United States has 3 times the colon cancer rate as of India. And India actually has a very, very low rate of Alzheimer's. So there are multiple reasons why that may be happening, but there is some thought that this is related to the diet. And Greece has a very low rate of heart disease. And that seems to be because they have a diet particularly rich in garlic, rosemary, marjoram, and onions. And Spain, interestingly enough, has one of the lowest LDL levels or bad cholesterol levels. And it's hypothesized that that's because of the amount of saffron that they eat. Now let's talk a little bit about cumin. Okay, so now cumin comes either as a seed or it comes ground. Now today we're using ground cumin. The seed has a very different sort of flavor, but generally, if you want to get to utilize the seed, you usually have to heat it up in some type of an oil to temper it, to get some of those essential oils out of the spice and get a little bit more of the flavor out. Cumin, very similar. The seed is very similar to dill or parsley. It's found very readily in the Mediterranean and India. It's also used very readily in countries like Mexico. Interestingly enough, when I was doing some research about the spice, it's actually one of the spices that was used in mummification with the Egyptians. So it's a very ancient spice. I think one of the reasons why cumin is very popular is, it doesn't have a lot of the heat. It has a lot of sort of the peppery notes, but it doesn't have the extreme heat that you get from chilies. So if you have issues with very, very spicy food, cumin can actually be something that will work really well for you. It is also recognized as a symbol of fidelity and love, and it's used readily in wedding ceremonies. And, just a note, you may want to write this down. It also has some aphrodisiac properties. So take that as you will. Then let's talk about, some of the other health benefits. There's some indication that the cumin actually helps the pancreatic secretions come out more readily. And we need the pancreatic secretions for digestion. So, I guess you could sort of hypothesize if there's any benefit with, things like pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer. I don't think there's any specific reason, but there is some evidence that cumin does help stimulate those pancreatic enzymes. It's also an immunity booster and good metabolic support for energy production. Now, cilantro also comes as a seed and also comes as an herb like this. Now, it's very difficult to grow cilantro. I have tried many times, and it goes to seed very, very quickly. So I typically tend to get it from the grocery store. When you get it, you really want to get, you don't want to have any black on the leaves. You want to get the ones that have really nice, dense leaves like this. The stems are very, very potent. I tend to save the stems for when I'm making chutneys or if I'm making a stock, especially Asian stocks. The stems of the cilantro are very flavorful. So, essentially, as I just said, the herb is from the leaves and the spice is the seeds. It's very related to parsley. And it's one of the most ancient spices and herbs, dating back to 5000 BC. Again, it's native to the Mediterranean and Greece. Has a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits, some cholesterol lowering and blood sugar lowering benefits, and may actually be good for the liver. So people that have, fatty liver disease or cirrhosis, there may be some benefit with cilantro, and can also help in some cases with headaches and anxiety and insomnia. Okay,
sorry to
so
interrupt. If you haven't muted yourself, could you mute yourself on Zoom so we can hear? Thank you.
okay, so before we kind of start the recipe, are there any questions about anything I just said thus far? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the ingredients. We talked a little bit about the cilantro, which is kind of like, I think, the star in this particular recipe. We are actually doing a salad with two different types of greens. I mentioned Bib lettuce. I don't know how it is in some of the parts of the country that you all are at, but the grocery store that I typically go to is very hit or miss in terms of what kind of supplies and what thing is in stock. So I did not see any Bib lettuce, so I decided to do romaine. So this is chopped up romaine. I opted to do baby kale instead of typical kale, just because I thought it's a little bit milder, and just it also requires a little bit less chopping. But if you don't like kale, spinach is a good option. Arugula is a lovely option with its kind of peppery notes. So any of those, and if you don't like greens like that, and you're sort of still building that into your eating repertoire, you could just completely skip the greens like this and just do the romaine if that's what you like. And we're also going to do some chopped up pepper, and this is a red one, but these are in season right now, so red, orange, even green bell peppers are fine. About a cup and a half of chopped up carrots. Now, I opted to do one other vegetable. This is not on the recipe, and you don't have to do this, but I wanted to add some radishes, because one of the other things that you're looking for, like I said, when you're removing certain elements and you're trying to make a meal taste really good, is you want to add some other textures. The radishes, I think, give a really nice crunchy type of texture, which we're also going to get with the pepitas or the pumpkin seeds. But the radishes kind of give a little bit of a sort of bitter note, but not in a really pungent bitter way. But this gives a little bit more kind of crunch to the salad and a little bit more texture. Then we're going to do olive oil. Now, this is avocado oil. It's not olive oil, but any kind of mild oil, olive oil is fine. I just happened to grab the avocado oil today. If you want to make this a completely oil-free meal, which you can, I do a lot of whole food plant-based recipes where we just completely exclude the oil. You can do either water or vegetable broth as a substitute, because oil, while it's very important for the salad dressing, it does have a fair number of calories. So you definitely want to be measuring out the amount of dressing that you use per serving. Okay, then we've got about a cup of the chopped cilantro. We've got a lime, and we have some sugar. I'm not using all of this sugar. I just put some in this container. But again, if you want to make this completely sugar-free, you could leave it out. I do think you need a little bit of sweetness to balance out some of the acidity of the lime, sorry. But you could use swerve, if anybody has used that as a sweetener, or you could use monk fruit sweetener if you wanted to cut out some of the sugar. And then in terms of the protein, that's one question that I get a lot about protein. Most of you are really trying to, when you're working with the RDs are always talking to you about, protein. And I have had several patients that are trying to eat a little bit more plant-based, but have some struggles with finding protein. So the big protein elements in this dish are the quinoa, and this is actually a cup of dry quinoa, and this is how much you get after it's cooked. This is an excellent form of protein. And then the chickpeas. Now, if you are not, I am vegetarian. If you are not vegetarian, you could easily do some grilled chicken, some grilled shrimp. You could even put tofu in this if you wanted to try something different. And another thing you could even do, because we're doing a lot of sort of more Mexican-ish type flavors, you could even do black beans. I think that would be really good as well. So the reason why I bring that up is I think a lot of times when you're looking at a recipe, a lot of times people will look at the recipe and they'll say, oh, I don't have this. I don't have chickpeas in my pantry, so I can't make this dish. Or, I don't have pumpkin seeds. I can't make this dish. No, you can definitely make it. You just maybe want to add some substitutes. Like maybe instead of pumpkin seeds, you use sunflower seeds. Or maybe you use a little, a sprinkle of almonds or something like that. But never give up on a recipe if you don't have each and every ingredient listed. Now, this is kind of where some other elements come in. We talked about heat. I personally love spicy food. So we are going to put in a serrano. This is actually a serrano chili. I couldn't find jalapenos, believe it or not. So this is actually a serrano chili from my garden. So I probably will use a little bit less of the serrano chili because it tends to be a little spicier than some of the jalapenos that we've been getting. And then we're also just going to do very simple salt and pepper and garlic. And these are pretty big cloves. I tend to like a lot of garlic. I might even, I would usually add one more, but I think these are pretty sizable. So first thing, I'm going to go ahead and make the dressing, but first, are there any questions from anyone? Nope. Okay. All righty. So basically, we're just going to add all of the ingredients for the dressing. So we're going to add the oil to my blender.
I have one question for you. I know you were talking earlier about cilantro, and I love cilantro personally, but I know that for some it tastes like soap.
Yes.
Is there a substitution in case anyone here isn't is there something that we could replace the cilantro with in this recipe? Or
that's a great question. And actually, I was going to say that. I was going to actually bring that up when we were talking about cilantro. So thank you for bringing that up. Yes, actually, my sister hates cilantro, hates it with a passion. She said that, it tastes very soapy to her. And apparently it's very, there's a gene, I guess, where some people really find, cilantro to be pretty noxious. If you really can't tolerate cilantro, you can do parsley. It's different, but I think, and not the, the curly parsley that they put as a garnish. You want to do the Italian flat leaf parsley. I think that's a really good substitute. But that's a good question. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and add the chili. Any other questions?
not right now, but please, anyone who's watching, leave them in the chat and I'll be sure to ask for you, or you can ask yourselves.
Okay. So I'm going ahead and adding some of the sugar. I don't usually measure a whole lot when I'm cooking. So that's the hardest part for me when I'm coming up with recipes. I tend to just sort of say, oh, this looks good. And so then when I have people that will say, well, can you give me the recipe? I always have to sort of eyeball it and say, oh, and the other thing I would also say is, you should taste as you're going along with the recipe, because, as you're sort of putting your ingredients in, after you blend it, you may say, this needs a little bit more lime, it needs a little bit more cilantro, a little bit more salt, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and add the lime juice. Now, the reason why we're using the lime juice, several reasons. One, like I said, we do need some acidity in this dish to make it a little bit more, to make it taste a little bit more refreshing and, kind of just wake up our palate a little bit. The other reason why is, most vinaigrettes, which is essentially what we're doing, we're making a cilantro vinaigrette. When you do a vinaigrette, you need to have, if you're basically making an emulsion with the oil, And usually you need some type of an acid. And typically we use vinegar when we're making a dressing. So this is the acid that we're using. In this case, we're using the lime. I might add also, normally I have like a really beautiful lemon squeezer. I have way too many kitchen gadgets, but this is actually my very last meal that I will be making in this kitchen. We are moving, and I kind of wanted to have one last hurrah in this kitchen that I just adore. So, so this is it. So I'm going to go ahead and add my pepper, a little bit more, and salt, and the 2 garlic cloves, and that's really it for the for the dressing, essentially. Maybe. Sorry, AirPod fell out again.
We have a question about the dressing, and it's, can you make
Okay.
the dressing ahead of time? Will it keep well?
Yes, you can definitely. I probably would not make this more than like I'd probably not make it, it'll keep for about 2 days. I wouldn't really do it any longer than that. I think then it just it starts to turn the color. It's not as nice looking in terms of the color, but yeah, you could definitely make it like, if you were having people over and you wanted to kind of dress the salad, when people came over, yeah, you can actually make it. You can make it ahead of time.
And is
That's a good.
there an acid aside from limes that you can use? Would lemons do well, or is it really better with a lime for the flavors?
I think personally, I think lime and cilantro go really well together.
Agree.
I think if you were going to do something like this with lime, I probably would not use cilantro. I'd probably use a different herb. I'd probably do like tarragon or parsley or basil would be really good. I don't know that I would do the cumin. I'd probably do lemon, probably like one of the other herbs that I talked about. And in terms of the spice that I would use, I'd probably use maybe a little bit more garlic and maybe a little bit of like dried oregano or something like that. That's probably what I would do. But again, this is just a flavor profile that I like. You can definitely use whatever you like. If you're not a fan of lime or you're not a fan of cilantro, like I said, you can certainly make swaps. Now this is not spicy enough for me, so I'm gonna add some more of the pepper. Any other questions as we're going on? And let me see. I think it's actually needs a touch of sugar as well. That's perfect. Okay, so now we can go ahead and assemble the salad. So, excuse me. First, I'm going to go ahead and add my cilantro. I'm sorry, my quinoa. I clearly have cilantro on the brain right now. So we'll add the quinoa. I see. In the what? In my shirt? Okay. Got it. Sorry. Okay. So this is the quinoa. This can definitely be made ahead. I actually recommend making a batch of this and keeping it. You know, it's very, very interchangeable. A great source of protein, as I said. So, you know, I definitely would make that ahead of time. And we'll go ahead and add our greens. I'm gonna give this a little toss and I'll add the rest of the elements and then we'll add the dressing. You know, the other reason I actually added the radishes was just for like a little bit more pop of color. I think that, you know, when you make your food really, you know, visually interesting and pretty, it just kind of makes you more interested in eating it. One of the other things I'm also I tell my patients when they see me is, you know, for a lot of people, you know, adding vegetables can be very, very difficult. So what I kind of tend to tell my patients is with every meal to try to just think to yourself, how can I add another vegetable to this meal? And maybe that's going to mean just adding, you know, spinach to your sandwich, or if you're making a salad, in this particular case, the radishes. But as you kind of start thinking that, it becomes more and more second nature. Okay.
We have another question, and it's about quinoa. And it says,
Yes.
sometimes when I make it, it has a foamy coating. How do you remove that?
You should rinse it really, really well. Or the other thing you can do is when you, is it foamy, and does it also have like a bitter taste, or is it just the foam?
I just see foam in the question. So
Okay. Really, it's just rinsing it really, really well. The other thing you can also do if it has a little bit of a bitter flavor is you can toast the quinoa ahead of time, just on a pan, just kind of toast it a little bit. Or you can cook it with broth, like chicken broth or vegetable broth, and that will actually take away a little bit of that bitterness. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the dressing.
and this is proving to be a learning lesson, a lot of learning for me tonight. I have a question when you're talking more about plant-based proteins, and like, what are others aside from quinoa or tofu, if you're going vegetarian, that are good? I know you mentioned a little bit about it, but just in general, when you're considering it, what are other ways to get protein?
Edamame is a really good source. I mean, any kind of legumes, lentils, beans. To be honest with you, even broccoli has a fair amount of protein. Nuts and nut butters, you just have to watch the fat with them. That might be a good idea for another class if that's something that people are interested in.
I was certainly, I think for me, but I'm sure others, let us know in the comments.
So you don't want to overdress it so that it's, all you can taste is the dressing. But you don't want to underdress it either. So I think this is a good amount. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the papitas. And like I said, that's really for a little bit of that textural element. Okay. And so basically, salad is done. I'm going to go ahead and plate it so you can see it. And that's that pretty much is it.
So a question about spice. If you happen to be a little overzealous and make it too spicy, are there ways that you can pare the spice back in the dish, or have you kind of put yourself in a oh no situation?
Well, it depends on the dish. If it's a dish like if it's a soup or a stew or something like that, actually, just like how a lot of times they'll say potatoes can soak up a little bit of salt. If you're doing something like that, it'll make it a little less salty. It'll actually do the same thing for the spices as well. It depends on the dish. For certain things, I think that it's still salvageable. You may want to add some vegetables that have like some sweeter notes, like some tomatoes or carrots, sweeter peppers that'll temper some of that real spiciness. I presume we're talking about like heat, like cayenne type of spice.
Okay.
Sorry, these are clearly too big, too small for my ears, but are we talking about cayenne or are we talking about like just any type of spice?
I think it was just any general spice.
Okay. Yeah, but that's, I think what you have to do is if it's a spice that's like very bitter, you're probably going to want to temper it with something that's a little bit sweeter. If it's something that's really like a fiery, like a chili, you're going to want to temper that with something that's a little bit more, mild. Sometimes like you could add a little bit of yogurt or something like that to the dish. That could also help. Any other questions?
If you have them, put them in the chat tonight. Joanna says it looks amazing.
Well, I think you have to try the recipe and let me know. Hopefully this is something that's pretty accessible for everybody. what I like about this is, there's a lot of color. It's using a lot of seasonal vegetables. Again, this is a template. Most of the recipes that I try to create are templates, meaning, you can mix and match certain things. Like you can make this exact same salad. Like we talked about, making things ahead of time. Something else that would be very simple to do would be to make the quinoa ahead of time. And instead of using, like I said, instead of using a lime cilantro vinaigrette, we talked about the lemon vinaigrette. You could also, I've also done this where I have made this sort of a Middle Eastern type of dish where the protein will be, it's the same elements, it's still quinoa, but instead of using chickpeas, I'll use lentils. And the dressing will sometimes use a little bit of pomegranate vinegar. And the spice that I'll use is actually sumac, which works really, really well with those Middle Eastern types of elements. So, point of this for you is to kind of think outside the box, first off, with spices, and how you can use them to make, give a little bit more flavor to your foods. But the other part of this is also to kind of say, all right, I have sort of a basic recipe, but how could I adapt this to, maybe like if you don't like cilantro, you could easily do something similar with basil. If you don't like chickpeas and you want to add a meat-based protein, you could add, like we talked about grilled chicken, you could add shrimp. I think some of the chicken sausages that they have on the market now, which are really, really easy. You just really have to heat them up in the microwave because they're pre-cooked. I think that would be a really nice sort of twist on like a summer pasta salad. If you want to add different vegetables, you could do grilled zucchini, you could do grilled asparagus, lots of different ways to mix and match this. If you wanted to do a different grain instead of the quinoa, you'll have a little bit less protein in the dish. But if you are not a fan of quinoa, you could do barley, you could do farro. I think a couscous salad is really nice, especially the pearled Israeli couscous, which is a little bit bigger. You could even, if you wanted to do a regular pasta salad, you could even do like some of the banza or chickpea salad, a chickpea pasta. So I think you kind of get the drift. Like you can do many, many, many different iterations of the same thing. So again, you're not getting bored with what you're eating.
Awesome. And last question, or this is just a question unless there's any more that come in. How long would quinoa, you said to make it in bulk, how long would it stay in the fridge if you made more servings?
Usually I'll keep for about, I'd say for about 4 to 5 days.
Okay. Awesome.
And it's very forgiving. This is a type of thing where, like if you did like a mason jar salad, where, mason jar salad, where you do the dressing on the bottom, you put the grain on top, you do, other vegetables, and you usually end on top with the salad greens because those are the most delicate. And you could actually make like a whole week's worth of salads like that, and it will keep for the entire week.
Awesome.
Carita, I have a quick question about quinoa. So
Yeah.
often I think when people sort of cook, and quinoa could be a little bit intimidating, although it's not, but cooking, I cook in my pressure cooker. Would you freeze and pre-portion and sort of freeze it for later? Do you you do that?
You could. I don't typically freeze that, but you definitely could. I think the only thing I would say is if you're going to freeze it, I'd probably use a little bit less liquid, because I think that when you thaw it out and reheat it, it's going to get very like clumpy and soggy if you freeze it. So I'd probably, I'd make it actually with a little bit, maybe like a fourth of a cup less water so that it doesn't get as much of that sogginess. And in terms of how to cook quinoa, I actually made this in my rice cooker. You can even make it I've made it in the microwave. I've made it in the pressure cooker, in the Instant Pot. You can make it on the stove. It's very similar to rice, but for me, I found that making it in the rice cooker is like the easiest and, the most hands-off way that I have to cook it.
And what about those 90-second or whatever they are, like the prepackaged quinoa things that you'll find in the rice aisle that you can microwave, or do those work well too if you just want to try it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've actually used those. I think, everybody gets really busy. So I like those a lot. Like there's actually one, I think it's called like Seeds of Change or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's a quinoa and brown rice pack with it's got a little bit of garlic seasoning, but I keep those for quick meals. And what I'll typically do with that is I'll cook that with a little bit of garlic, onion, and I will put I usually do beans, and I actually will use that as a filling and put them in like either, peppers that I have. You could do it in zucchini boats. I've put them in squash, acorn squash in the fall. That's like a really, really popular one. My family loves that one. But yeah, I think any of those are great. I've actually used, I think there's actually minute brown rice. There's minute rice that's, brown rice that they sell in little cups. I've used those sometimes too, that, sometimes you got to do what's most convenient, and it's better than, it's obviously better than going the fast food route.
Awesome. I'm also a big fan of Seeds of Change, so I'm glad to hear you say that.
You just have to watch the sodium content, but as a once in a while type of thing. Sorry about these AirPods, guys. Apologize for that. I think as long as you're not, I'm not a big fan of packaged and prepared stuff, but every so often they're very convenient, and I think that they can, help you get something on the table quickly. So any other questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I think everybody got a copy of the recipe. I am going to do a little bit of, self-promotion right now. I actually have an Instagram account that's called @thespicydoc, all one word, @thespicydoc. And that's kind of my, I guess, Cookstagram account, where I post recipes. I talk about spices. I talk about how to incorporate more vegetables into your diet. If that's something that you are interested in, please check it out on Instagram.
That's the Spicy Doc. I will put it in the comments.